welcome everybody to today's webinar, Marketing Resilience, Effective Strategies for Bringing Your Program to Life. So just to introduce myself, I'm Paula Fontana. I am VP of Global Marketing here at Illuminar. I've been in and out of the space really throughout my 20-year career. I spent some time in ed tech. I spent some time in third-party risk management. I actually started my career in emergency management at Lucent Technologies. And now I lead global marketing for Illuminar. But it's interesting sort of how all of these things are combining, really embedding continuous learning at scale, and excited to have this esteemed group of panelists join me today. So Andrew, do you want to take a moment to introduce yourself?
Sure. So first off, Paul, I just learned something new about you. We've known each other for like over a year. I did not know you began your career in emergency management, and that's just fascinating. Anyway, and I can't wait to learn more about Shane and Jeremy, because apparently I don't pay attention to, intros. But anyway, my name's Andrew Owlett. The last 17 years, I've been in the cybersecurity and corporate security space, really across few main industries, tech and e-commerce, defense, national security, higher education, healthcare, and public safety. I like to build teams from the ground up and really build tech from the ground up to allow us to more quickly sense risk, respond to risk, and recover from risk. Super excited today because really over the last 17 years been focused in like messaging to an executive team and then all the way down to like tactical executors, and it's completely different across the board how you communicate with folks, how you learn what's important to them. And today I'm excited to talk more about that. So thanks for having me. Over to Shane.
To have you.
Hey
Shane.
everybody, nice to meet you all virtually. I'm Shane Matthew. I'm the founder of Stone Risk Consulting, and I've worked in the business continuity, crisis management, disaster recovery industry for now coming up on 18 years. And I've worked in that time for a lot of different companies, either as the program leader or as a consultant, helping them start their programs. And I've worked at companies such as Zoom, Netflix, Gulfstream, and a couple of others. But what I really am excited about in this presentation is this webinar is the discussion around marketing, because there's good marketing and bad marketing, and there's no marketing. And I think that's actually bad marketing as well. But either way, this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart, so I'm excited to be a part of the panel.
Thrilled to have you, Shane. Thank you. Jeremy?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jeremy Steins. I'm thrilled to be here. I am a managing director at BDO, which is the 5th largest tax audit and advisory firm. I lead up their innovation for our forensics practice, which includes resilience in there, and I come in through that resilience door. I have a bit of an island of misfit toys background. I started off as an art historian and now find myself as head of forensics innovation, which is a pretty strange journey. But I have always focused on creativity, creative direction, marketing, and branding tied to technology. And that has really been my core for a number of years. I'm excited today because I've always liked to push the envelope with marketing and recognize that for a lot of people, risk is a social endeavor where you need to enlist the support of a lot of people. And so you need to think about what you're competing with internally for those times and those eyes and that attention. And we're going to bring you some interesting ways to do that today.
I love that. Risk is a social endeavor. That is so true. So before we kick into the panel discussion, we're going to warm everybody up. And we're going to do a quick little game show here. So if you would take out your phones and join our poll here. Many of you have used Menti before. If you haven't, it's super easy, I promise. Go ahead and scan the QR code, or you can go to menti.com and enter the code 6350-0354. We'll give folks a minute to join. And this fast-paced trivia game, get your blood going on a Thursday. All right. Everybody ready? It looks like we got 21 folks on board. Go ahead and get started. It's totally anonymous. We're not keeping score beyond your fake names. What is the single most important thing in great marketing? Creativity, humor, knowing your customer, or data and analytics? You get more points if you answer more quickly. All right, everybody's voted. Let's go. The correct answer is knowing your customer. It's like most of you got that one. So how are we doing here? It's like rivets in the lead. Go to the next one. Question 2. Why is your program why so important? Provides clarity, inspires engagement, overcomes resistance, creates connection and alignment, makes it relevant, or all of the above. Okay, everybody voted. So it's all of the above. So you're all right. Leaderboard. Rivet. Who's Rivet? All right, this is for the win, you guys. Why are lived experiences so powerful by catalyzing change? It's what we're all about in marketing, creating lived experiences. It's because we're hardwired to remember stories, emotional connection, relatability. Oh, you guys are too fast. Beat me to it. What's the answer here? All of the above. All right, so who's our winner? Rivet takes it home. Impressive. Well, thank you all for playing. That was a lot of fun. So before we dive in, we wanted to get a sense for where people are in their program marketing. So I think we all know that it's important for us to connect with others really across the organization in various ways. I mean, that's inherently a big part of what we do in risk and resilience. But where are you in that process? So while folks are answering that, just curious, Jeremy, you work with a lot of different organizations globally. Yeah, I think we've all seen that, the power of connecting with others through all that we've experienced over the last several years. Why is great marketing, in your opinion, just so important in, when you're building a program today?
I think there's just so much internal competition. I'm at a point now where email is almost like snow. You get so much email, you're really competing for the attention of everybody in your organization. And it's one of those things is, how do you straddle the line between being part of the organization and representing it, but also being different enough that you stand out from the other initiatives? And I think that's the real art form, the sweet spot that you look for to really drive your program forward. I think in organizations where you're regulated, there's a have to component of it. It's your job to do it. And those where you're not regulated, that's where you can really push that creativity. Now, I think there should be creativity on both sides, but it's the carrot and the stick. If you really want to create that carrot in the environment where you may not have the stick of regulation to drive it forward. So for me, it's the competition with other initiatives internally, and that's how you're going to get engagement as risk managers or risk owners in an organization. You tend to not have a full staff that you need to execute. So you really need to enlist the support of others. And that's really the root of marketing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's obvious over the last several years, that no man or no woman is an island, and we are interconnected, and great marketing is all about connecting people around a common problem. Andrew, why, from your perspective, why market resilience at all? Shouldn't this be an obvious thing?
So I think sometimes it's hard because when you get into a role and when you get into your day-to-day, marketing may not be the first thing that comes to your head through your head. And maybe, hey, we have regulation, we need to go ahead and either check the box or raise the bar where we can in that environment to execute on very well-known like tasks. But to Jeremy's point, I think marketing resilience is important because you need to show your value and you need to articulate your value, and not in terms of traditional like compliance check the box activities, but how are you enabling business to do their job faster and better at the end of the day. And again, not just compliance focused, but relating it back to the business that you're in, and also thinking of what you're doing as a business. It's a mind shift. Like when you go into your job every day, how are you running your business if you're a leader, or how are you executing on the business mission as a tactical executor? So just shifting the mindset a little bit, I think is important.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that's been very obvious, how core, effective risk awareness and resilience is in navigating uncertainty and really initiating change, at a pace that I think none of us have really seen in our lifetimes. Shane, you have a really unique style in the way that you are able to effectively market and connect with others. Just curious about your perspectives on not only why go through that process of connecting with others. I mean, you participated recently in our Game Changers interview. We featured you, and one of the things that really stood out to me is really the way that you talked about your personal journey and changing the way that you operate within the broader business. Maybe share a little bit more about that with us. And
well, I think the other panelists have already touched on one key factor, is that like we want to encourage the participation and gather, even in a regulated environment, we want people to participate. Some of the webinar chat has already alluded to that fact, that you don't want to make this a chore, right? And I think that really has impacted me a lot, because you start to see a tendency in those regulated check the box environments where the data itself that you're getting is not good. It's garbage in, right? Garbage in, garbage out, right? So that's really where I've started to change my approach to this, is to try to be more engaging with people in these environments, because I want people to really not look at this activity as a chore, because when you do it that way, then you tend to get the least, the worst information possible from people, and just let's just fill this out and make sure Shane's not on our back this week, right? So we don't want that. And that's why I've always tried to make sure that anything that I'm looking at from a program development perspective is going to be very engaging with people, and people become a little bit more interested in participating. And that ultimately gets me better data. I mean, I look at it this way. I ask my kids to make their beds every day, and they still, after multiple years of telling them, do not understand why it's important to them to make their bed. It's important to me, right? But I'm trying to teach them something, but in the background, they're just haphazardly throwing their sheets on the bed just to satisfy me. So I don't want that to happen in my business continuity programs. I do not want to just tell people to do something and get their haphazard response to my request, because ultimately my heart is to make sure that the business succeeds in a disruption.
so how do you assess demand for your program?
Yeah, that's a good question. I use this example about my wife. She is a pharmacist, and she makes lotions and scrubs out of shea butter and other natural products. And a couple months ago, I opened the door, and there was 100 pounds of shea butter sitting on my doorstep. She had ordered 100 pounds. And I was like, why? Why did you order this? And so she assessed the demand of her products because she started to sell them maybe slightly overboard, right? She just assumed, hey, people are liking it and maybe people one day want all this, right? So when we incorrectly assess demand, we can really put ourselves into a lot of problems. Like I know a lot of people say, hey, I'm feeling pretty good, but I would push back the question on how confident you are by asking, well, how do you know? And so one of the things I look at is customer behavior. Like, and I use some of the marketing terminology because I think there's really a lot of relevance here. You know, if your BC users or DR users are actually coming to you or wanting more help on certain things, that's a great sign. If you're not seeing that actively, that's a sign of your demand being low, right? And then another way to tell is how communicative are customers or your stakeholders. Are they proactively talking to you, or are you always the one initiating it, right? And then third is what's your acquisition cost to actually get somebody to do the work you're doing? Are you constantly setting up meetings with them and they're skipping out on things, or it's taking you multiple deadlines to get them to return a quality product that you've asked them to build with you? I mean, the acquisition cost for one customer versus another, you can compare them pretty easily, right? And learn. Now, if all your customers are taking you that long, then again, you have a demand problem too. So I think you really need to be able to self-assess and really be able to quantify, in a lot of ways, all these things I just mentioned: behavior, communications, acquisition costs, and that could give you a clue as to whether you're doing well in this area or not.
And Shane, just building on what you just said and something that Matt said in the chat, I mean, not driving, your agenda, but letting the business and being in tune with the business on their agenda and how you can enable their agenda as a business is extremely important. And you highlight, like, subliminally, like just being in touch, right? I mean, it's so incredibly important as a measure of success to measure, like, how many people are reaching out to you versus how many people are you reaching out to. I think that's a fantastic point. And sometimes, people may not need a lot, and maybe you're being proactive in your engagement and you're getting ahead of any questions because, again, you go back and you're in touch with, like, business prioritization. I'll give a real life example. I mean, recently, we've shifted our focus in the organization that I work day to day in. Instead of doing monthly engagements, we're doing quarterly engagements, and in between, we're kind of testing out if there's, like, engagement touch points that we're missing or that we're hitting, and if the engagement timeline is sufficient for what our audience needs. And we're actually realizing that they need more engagement, not less engagement. Our philosophy was, hey, we don't want to be a burden. We don't want to conflict with business priorities. But, at the end of the day, our stakeholders are coming to us and saying, hey, we want more time with you. And that's a measure, in my eyes, that what we were doing previously was actually the right level of engagement. It wasn't too much. It wasn't too little. It was perfect, kind of in the middle. And we solicited that feedback ahead of time. But going back to your point, I mean, using those as, like, measures and trend line that over time too, like see like how your program's kind of shifting. Are there specific times throughout the year that you may want to kind of loosen up on engagement because the business has high priorities to kind of hit, high targets to hit? How can you get in and help them hit those targets too? So instead of maybe engaging with them, during those high touch points before you engage with them a little bit more, now you can shift your strategy throughout the year a little bit based on business need.
I think one thing that you both bring up, which is really interesting, is this notion of the individual versus the corporation. And I think a lot of times when people talk about resilience, they talk about it's good for the organization for these reasons, which is true. But what I found is that's not motivating for people. There are a lot of things that are good for an organization. So how do you make it relevant to the individual, whether by participating, you are developing professional development skills that you wouldn't have otherwise, you're protecting the people around you, or this is going to help you reach your goal of X. And so I think it's really about persona building, and personas are something that are used in marketing a lot. And it's basically creating an archetype of different categories of people. So you may have one for the most senior leadership, one for the director level, one for a manager level, and you're gonna have different approaches for those people because you want it to be targeted to what's relevant to them. And I think that's so essential. Where people fall down the most is they kind of speak in a monolithic tone at an organizational level and never get down to how it benefits the individual to participate in this program. I think that's what motivates people in the end.
Yeah, I think that gets to this concept of the why, and I think to really assess, that core why for your institution more collectively. To your point, Jeremy, it's really about understanding the people that make up the whole, right? And connecting that with your organization's broader mission, culture, values, etc. And assimilating that in a way that makes sense. And so starting with the why and coming up with a rally cry of sorts that really connects people around a common purpose. I love what you said there, Andrew, in terms of like, this is really about improving the business, right? This isn't necessarily improving our risk awareness or improving our resiliency as a siloed activity, right? This is about how do we improve the way we serve our customers? How do we improve the way we relate with one another? How do we improve the quality of our processes? How do we connect with our stakeholders, our third parties, your partners, et cetera, in a way that really moves everyone forward. And so for me, marketing is a way to define that central tenet, but also really provide a blueprint for not only the how, but the what, and really distill that to its simplest elements in a way. And Jeremy, you have a paper that you put together on it's a playbook of sorts around marketing. So if you want to take the group through some of the tenets that you outlined there.
Well, I mean, I've had exposure with a lot of different programs of different scales and in different levels of maturity. And so some of the large global ones where you're trying to drive resiliency across, thousands of sites across the globe, they're really forced to really rely on marketing in a heavy way. And so you get a lot of creative ideas that come from that out of necessity almost. And when you look at it, I think number one is really understand your program's brand and the reputation in the organization. A lot of people don't even think about a program having a brand, but I think we've all been in organizations where people hear business continuity and people run the other way, where they're not running to you being like, oh, more please. So I think understanding the history, why it got there, what failed about it is really important, but then developing the core tenets of what you stand for. And we take people through an exercise of building their purpose, their promise, their personality. I'll explain each of these, their value proposition and their story. And so it's essentially a building blocks of how you talk about your program. Your purpose is why you exist in the organization and how it aligns to the organizational goals. So it sets that bigger, loftier view. The promise is what the individual is going to gain by participating in the program. So it takes it down to that individual level. The personality is the way that you're going to communicate. Are you in an environment where you can leverage humor in a great way? Are you in a bank where that's just not going to fly? So you really have to understand the environment you're in and what are the guide rails that you need to operate in. And then your value proposition is a mixture of emotional and informational value that you bring. Emotional meaning that we're going to help you feel confident in a crisis, would be an example. The informational could be we're going to provide these services to you. And so it becomes this mixture of what you offer as a program. And then finally is the story. It's like, why am I standing in front of you today talking to you about this? And why should you care? And so it pulls all those pieces together in a brief narrative like an elevator pitch. So we really look at ways of arming you with the right information to talk about your program intelligently, to connect back to the values of the organization, and to connect to the individual. There's a lot more in the paper. We can distribute it after, but that's just one of the highlights that we like to feature.
So part of that paper, you articulate this maturity curve.
Yeah, the demand model.
From an engagement perspective.
Yeah, I'll explain. This is actually a really fun exercise. So basically what we do is once we got to understand the audience, we take each of those personas or an archetype of a group of people, and we map it on what we call the demand model. And it's a scale that goes from left to right. And it's basically saying, where do your stakeholders fall on this scale? And unaware means they don't know your program exists. They have no idea. Draftee means they've been mandated to participate, but they don't really see the value in a program. Enlisted means that they're willing to participate, but they're not really asking to endorse it or not. They're just kind of quietly going about their business. Loyalist means they proactively participate and see its value. And your evangelist means that they sing your praises across the organization. You're never going to have all evangelists, and that should never be the goal. But what you want to do is map each of your constituents against this and then come up with a strategy on how to move them up one rung. How do we take people from draftee to enlisted, and what are we going to do with those? How do we take the enlisted to move them to loyalists? Now, the quiet quitters in this mix live between the draftees and the enlisted. You never hear from them. They just quietly quit. The quality could be low. You want to meet people through that and try to have them sit between that enlisted and the loyalist side, because then you're at least hearing from them. You're getting feedback, and you're getting that engagement that Shane and Andrew were talking about earlier.
Yeah. So sorry,
good.
I was just going to invite everyone that hasn't participated in the poll yet. It's interesting to see. We've got a fair number of people who have responded already that have either enlisted people in the process or really have them have deputized them in some key ways. So that's exciting to see. If you haven't joined yet, visit menti.com and enter the code. So it's the same poll that you were in before, 6350 0354. As you work with different organizations, what is the tendency, sort of where does the maturity of organizations sit, as a general rule?
It's all over the place, frankly. And you may find it differs by level. So sometimes at a senior, COVID has really moved the C-suite level from this kind of unaware aspect of programs to much further up in that list, and mainly because it's become a C-suite discussion. So I think there's a real opportunity that's come from a horrible situation, but the opportunity for everyone on this call is that you've gotten visibility at that level. I think where people struggle, if you were in a purely compliance-driven program, you are going to sit at that draftee level, and the quality is going to be poor, and you're not really going to get the results that you're looking for. You're not going to get true resilience. You may get compliance with the requirements, but you're not going to get the goal of those compliance, which is a more resilient organization. And so I think you have to be narrow in how you look at this and say, if we have a lot of people sitting in that draftee, what are the things we're going to do to bring them along in the process? How are we going to move them over? And I think we come up with a strategy for each of those levels and execute against it.
Jeremy, I think what I found fascinating is like when you use the words like quiet quitters between the draftee and the enlisted stage. And I appreciate that perspective because it cued in my head really kind of bucketing your stakeholders into these categories. How that helps is that you can kind of question like how you're doing things and how you're engaging with those people. And that allows you then to adjust your approach. I think sometimes we get kind of lost with, okay, like they're not engaging with me. Like, why aren't they doing it? Like, why are they ignoring me? It's always on them to fix them. It's never on us to fix our approach. And then maybe if we fix our approach, that'll allow us to get better engagement, better quality of data. And I think the approach that you've outlined in your paper, and somebody in the chat was like, please provide the paper. So we'll have to do that. But I think that's easily digestible. But then on the other side of things, on the, like, my head practically goes to, a lot of folks, their staffing levels in their organization, may not be able to focus a lot of time and energy into marketing a program. So interested to hear Shane, Jeremy, Paula, like your perspectives on kind of like how can folks with limited staffing, limited time kind of get the level of engagement they need.
Yeah, and I'll just tag on to the idea here that this graphic is great in that it demonstrates the spread, but I think it also is a good indicator of how much energy and effort it takes you to go up one level. I kind of look at like dieting, right? So you really have good intentions and you're trying to proceed towards a goal, but there's so many factors that can quickly derail your progress, whether you're intentional or unintentional, right? And so I say the same thing about marketing your programs. You could have a lot of enlisted people, but there's so many distractions in your day-to-day environment. Your work headwinds could change your perspective on how much effort and energy you want to devote to this topic. And easily, without a good value proposition and a marketing approach that's formalized, and you could also do the same thing. You could take your foot off the gas pedal and say, hey, we've got enough enlisted people, we're good. And very quickly, in a blink of an eye, you see all those that momentum shift because of factors outside of your control. So you have to pay attention to this. It cannot be something you take for granted.
I think it also points you back to problems that you may have. So let's say you have an engagement issue with this audience. Maybe they don't understand the value of the brand. You need to go, and that's something anyone can do as a program, is go back and revisit that and say, how am I talking about this? Those are easy wins to really look at. And how am I building competencies, real competencies in these people, as opposed to giving them requirements to complete. And so you're right, being a party of one in a situation can be really challenging. So you have to be judicious of where you spend your time, but this can help point you of where you should spend your time, that you'll get the greatest bang for your buck.
And also, I mean, I guess, just kind of building on that, Jeremy, like how I look at it is you invest the time in marketing your program and the capability that you've either built or that you're building. And that can lead to, higher levels in the organization kind of seeing the value as long as you're marketing it appropriately. And then maybe, they're thinking to themselves, you're doing a lot with less. And maybe, if we can, give you one person or give you a tool to help you out, you can take it from here to there. And painting that picture, marketing that picture could be extremely important and beneficial.
One last thing I'll say is like, Coca-Cola spends around $4 billion a year on marketing. The product's been around for hundreds of years now. Why do they do that, right? They could easily just say, let's coast, we're good. Everybody knows Coke right now. We don't have to do anything else, but they invest because there's a reason behind it. They know that the value of their product continues to grow and grows enough to manage that $4 billion investment. So I think you should, don't hesitate to think of it in that same way. Why should I be? Well, why shouldn't you is the better question.
I think the other key point about that is that, we live in a world that's constantly in flux, and especially consumer products like Coke, I think, are a great example of how, generationally there are massive shifts underway. And in order to stay relevant, like, you have to meet people where they are. If this goes back to understanding your audience and really connecting with them in a way that's meaningful and in a place where they are. You don't expect them to come to you. You need to go to them. And that was one of the profound kind of insights that came out of, for those that aren't familiar with this, we recently did some research around, and initially it was intended to be more of a maturity model. It evolved into more of an archetype study, where we really looked at how people define resilience. And we looked at it across two axes, engagement and systemization. And I think that the reality is that, especially with things such as risk management and resilience, there is no one size fits all. And oftentimes it relates to what you do in the organization. Oftentimes it has to do with your own personal experiences with risk and building resilience in your own life, and the roles and responsibilities that you carry. It's just a really interesting analysis of the priorities that people have when it comes to resilience and risk and crisis. And so how do you, think about that both at, on a personal basis, but then also in a way that scales? Andrew, what have you found be successful in that regard? As you're building, I mean, obviously you work with one of the largest organizations in the world. How do you do this in a way that feels really personal and meaningful to people, but then also has the punch and the impact as if you had millions and millions to spend on marketing your program?
So when I was first starting out, I said to myself mentally, like, you're on a clean slate and you know nothing about the organization. And that's just blatantly the truth, right? Like starting anywhere new, like coming in with that type of attitude is really, really good. So I spent a lot of my time just talking to people the first 6 months and learning about new nomenclature, a brand new language that I wasn't used to, and in a culture that I wasn't used to. So learning how to work with people, learning what's really important to them, and then asking questions, like just kind of like just back to the basics, right? Like, I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, I didn't over engineer anything. I just came in with a good attitude and asked questions and then offered to help, even if it wasn't touching like resilience, like just getting my foot into the business to really dive super deep into problems and then help them with strategy to navigate around them, was really the foundation for literally everything. And what that opened the door to is, in the world I live in today, it's very much a IT supply chain focused organization globally, 3 billion in revenue, 10,000 employees across the globe, like 3,000 different sites. So order of magnitude is pretty large. And working in a supply chain that has to pivot quite literally 8+ times a year based on macroeconomic challenges is really, and also other types of challenges, cyber challenges, physical security challenges. It just immense to keep track of that and to really understand the landscape. I knew from the get-go I couldn't do that alone. I needed to form those partnerships and alliances with people to help them understand that when you are going down the risk and resilience pathway, that they have advocates around them and people to help them to navigate those challenges. And that led to tech, that led to headcount, that led to executive buy-in and support, and eventually to other things.
Paul, I think you're muted. I think you're speaking and you're
Thank you. Shane, how do you know when you might need some help with this?
Well, I think going back to what I said earlier, you really have to do some self-assessment. And there's really 5 areas that I would advocate for you to look at your own programs with the marketing lens. Some people call it the 5 Ps of marketing, but I would easily be able to adapt this to your program. But number 1 is like, what are you promoting? What are you trying to achieve in your program? So you really need to understand, like, is there one thing or is there 6 things? What is the effort that you're trying to accomplish? And then you need to look at what your products are. Again, this might seem like I'm using a lot of business language, but I think you have to apply this logic that you are an entrepreneur in this environment that you're working in. And so you need to understand what your specific products are that you're selling. Is it the BIA? Is it risk assessments? Is it plans? Is it exercises? You need to know how much it costs. And I'm not just talking about from a physical perspective of the investment of time, but I'm talking about, like, what are your stakeholders giving up so that they can do this work, right? And then what are you giving up in order to mass produce these types of efforts and tools and and programs, so that way you're investing in the business. You need to understand those things, and then you need to understand, as Jeremy mentioned earlier, who your people you're really targeting. Like, you developing a targeting persona or around your audience is going to be key. And then finally, place. Place is important, because what it means is, where are people coming to get information from you? I know I've worked with Jeremy and his organization over a few years ago, and that was one of the key messages I got from that engagement was, do people come to your website and then just see like a static, hard to navigate type of place for information? And are they, unable to get information without calling you directly and getting a hold of you and getting your participation? Or can they go easily and access things? I was in Starbucks this morning, and I walked in and I saw like 20 drinks ready to go for people just walk in and grab them, because they were all using the app. It's easy to use, and Starbucks has taken advantage of that. And so you need to look at your program in that same lens. Like, are you promoting something? What's your product? The price they have to pay, who you're selling, and then finally, how are they getting these items? And if you can examine those and you feel like you're really investing in making sure all those are working well, that's when you're doing well. But the flip side, if any of those are not doing so well, those are signals you really need to get started in that area.
Yeah, I think you hit on something really important there. Make it easy for people to work with you. I think that is like one of, just in general, I feel like that is one of the biggest life hacks out there. Just being easy to work with, defining value in a way that's meaningful to your stakeholder. I brought up the slide that gives some examples about the business value of resilience. And one of the things that we focus on at Illuminar is not necessarily, is a lot of the benefit of great risk management or great resilience has to do with a better business, right? It has to do with more effective processes. It has to do with more engagement, with your employees, with your customers, more reliable service. And so these are really the underpinnings of a successful business. And when you articulate it in that common language of, hey, I'm in this to help you, you're able to really establish those effective partnerships. And it doesn't always come down to, I think there's a line between, when people talk about ROI, especially in the realm of marketing, I think there's a lot of over dependency on metrics. And metrics can either help or hurt. Sometimes they can be difficult, because everyone's, different, right? There is, everyone's in a slightly different situation. And so although that you may have demonstrated outcomes, results may vary, right? We all know that. But I think people buy they buy impact, they even buy a feeling, right? And so I think conveying, what it is, and it gets back to that concept of the brand promise, right? Or your why. People buy into an aspiration and a vision. And so although there's a lot of tactical that goes into great resilience or great risk awareness, I think painting a picture for what it means to the broader business and the people in it can be very, very impactful in helping them conceptualize their role in bringing this forward.
I would also just add one thing. You got to bring a good energy. You got to bring positivity. I mean, that it goes really far. I don't think people really underestimate what it means to come there with enthusiasm, loving what you're doing, bringing energy to what it is infectious, and it does make a big difference. And so you really have to really look at your countenance when you talk to people. How am I representing it? Am I fun? Am I collaborative? I'm all those things. Obviously, you need your purpose, you need the value, all of those, but that human connection piece and the positivity goes far.
Andrew, you do that really well. If you have any, what are some strategies that you use to really connect with people more effectively?
Funny. So Jennifer was asking kind of in the chat, and I spelled out part of it, and I was about to elaborate. I have this whole paragraph typed out as a follow-up to Jennifer's comment in the chat. But what number one, I really appreciate you saying I bring a lot of really positive energy to the table and everything. That's really kind. I think one of the biggest things is I talk a lot about empathy. Literally 2 weeks ago, gave a talk at my company about empathy, and just remembering, taking a step back, that we have, business priorities, we have organizational priorities, and they should be aligned. And then we have programmatic priorities. All three of those should be aligned. And then we have personal priorities, which may or may not be aligned with that, depending on where you want to go in your career and what you want to do. But there's a lot of priorities out there. And the one priority that we don't talk about enough is us, our health, mental well-being, physical well-being, and stuff like that. And just doing pulse checks with people when you're talking to them, and listening to tone, watching body language, paying attention to trends. If you have somebody that is super sharp and providing you with data when you need it, 3 days ahead of time before you need it, super engaged, and then they slip, that's an indicator that maybe something's going on in their world. Could be work related, could be personal related, but it's an opportunity to connect with them on a different level and just say, hey, notice you didn't provide, X, Y, and Z by this date. Totally get it that a lot's going on right now and everything. Is there anything I can do to help you? Would it help if we hopped on a call and I just listened to what you had to say? I record down what we need to get through this milestone and on to the next one. Is the mechanism we're using not helpful? And just getting those anecdotes and remembering that, you open the door. If they're really busy at work, they'll let you know. If they've been in and out of the office, they'll let you know, and then flex, the priorities that you may have set based on, what the business and what the stakeholders you're working with are kind of going through. So I think that's important, to just bring the human element back into things. And that allows you to connect with your stakeholders and drive business priorities a lot faster and better.
Yeah, I think this points to something that we talked about during the prep sessions. Being a big focus of marketing is reducing friction, right? And so taking that, as we often talk about, resilience or risk management, really being that outside in view to the organization, and being that coach that is able to see what folks in the business are unable to see just because they're in it, right? And so how do we help them reduce friction in the day-to-day? And I brought up an example of a stakeholder map. I think the stakeholder maps can be a really effective tool. We're going to share some of these resources after the webinar to really understand the connections between people, and how those, how the organization works in concert to deliver value, that whole value chain concept. And I mean, underpinning all of that, of course, is the core function of business continuity and resilience teams, and mapping that out, right? And so I think there's a lot of, whether it's the role of, whether it's working with people or whether it's, leveraging technology to more effectively paint that picture for people. I think there's all sorts of strategies that you can use. Shane, one thing that you do extensively, not only within organizations, but on social media and in the broader community, is you leverage humor quite extensively.
Well, I mean, if the question is, why am I so good at that, then that's going to be hard to answer. No, no, I mean, honestly, it's something, it's a natural state of being for me, is just to try to, lighten the mood of situations, and especially using self-deprecating humor. It always helps me kind of ease into new situations. That's just a personality trait. But I was reading the survey by Sprout Social recently, where they asked that question: can humor really drive engagement in your business environments? And 16% of people said it's very important to engage in humor, but then 72% says it depends on your business. And so it was really important to, I think Jeremy mentioned this earlier, was that it depends on your environment, obviously, right? But, I think what we have done as business continuity professionals is default to we're serious and this is a serious topic, which I completely get and I agree with. However, when's the last time you recall a great conversation with your insurance agent when you were getting a quote? Like, I doubt you can say that you've had a very positive feeling about that interaction, because it's generally a cost. And then I think in general, people have a hard time thinking about risk. It's a very complex topic, right? So I infuse humor into this industry in my interactions with people, largely because it really lightens the mood and the load on people's minds as they're thinking about this topic. And so I really, psychologically, it makes a difference, but more important, it really just allows people to take a breath and say, okay, look, this is a serious topic, but we can talk about this. We can think through this together. This is not the emergency right now. So we start to get better results. I just keep coming back to, I think it allows marketing, humor, brand value, all these topics we're talking about really comes down to the core, to me, that it allows you to really get the best results out of people on this hard and challenging topic.
What's the role of technology in bringing this home to your audience?
Well, to me, I think it's vitally important in today's age, and there's a lot of a lot of tools that you have at your fingerprints now as a BC practitioner. One of the things I like to use is video as much as I possibly can, and that includes recording, training on how to utilize our tools that we put out there, because it does a couple of things. One is people are audibly and visually oriented, and it can take advantage of both. But then secondly, it allows you to get an opportunity to see how good the tool is from that perspective of walking through. And so if you find bugs and mistakes or things that make it challenging, it's a great way for you to learn to figure things out. But I think technology is going to keep evolving, but that's definitely an area that I focus in on.
Jeremy, you got an example of a video.
Yeah,
Share.
I think technology is your enabler. If you have a scrappy small team, you need to use technology to leverage, to push everything out. And it is your workforce in a way. You need to have a very strong foundation, but you need to use it to its best. And that can mean, how do you engage with people? So for one program, there are too many requirements and it was confusing folks. So we broke it down to 5 that they needed to remember in a year. And to really make it sticky, we created an animated video of the 5 steps that was no language. It was all just acted out with characters. It was the biggest hit in the organization. And it was a way for you to really stand out, and to, back to some of the comments I saw in the chat, is drive simplicity. Like, you don't need to do 10,000 things. You need to do 5 things in a year, and we're going to support you in each of those steps. And we're not just going to communicate to you when you're late. We're going to communicate to you beforehand to set you up for success so we can move through these easily. So I think you just need to be creative about how you do that. And I think especially when you're a party of 1 or 2 and you have a big remit, marketing and technology are your best friends because they are your team. And so look at your spend, look at how you're setting things up, and really leverage those to really drive the education and the stickiness of your program.
Oh, that's great. And I know we're already getting short on time. I just want to take everyone through some resources that we're going to make available after the webinar. So we talked through a lot of concepts today. Many of you might be getting started with this concept of personas. Personas really help you better understand and articulate different categories of people inside and outside your organization. So we've got a starter kit of resources there. This is a canvas that you can use to really build out your brand promise. This is great as a workshop activity. We have this in the form of a mural board. Mapping customer journeys. So understanding how your different constituents across the organization are going to interact with your program, whether it be through technology or otherwise. You're really making that as simple as possible, and really bringing that to life in a way that is compelling. I also encourage you, if you haven't already, take the Resilience Archetypes quiz. This really gets at more of the qualitative aspects of how people come at the challenge of risk awareness and resilience, on those continuums of engagement and systemization. And again, we've had many teams use this as a workshop activity. It's a great way to get to know one another at a deeper level. There's some guides and things that we're going to be sharing. We will be leveraging this marketing playbook that Jeremy put together. And then Shane, if you want to take a couple of minutes just to talk about this new venture that you're involved in.
Sorry. Yeah, of course. Just really briefly, I'm entered into the fray of consulting, but my focus is not, I do obviously help companies with, traditional BCM planning and preparations, right? But I think where my heart has been centered around, and I've got a lot of inquiries around, is the focus on building your program and coaching through some of the common issues that resilience practitioners get. We often don't have the resources or time and effort to get consistent discussion with other professionals that have done this and experienced good things and bad things. So that's where I'm helping companies right now.
All right. And thank you, Shane. So I want to thank all of you for joining us today. I hope you got something out of the conversation. We're excited to continue the conversation, well beyond this. Thank you to our panel. You guys, as always, just absolute legends in what you do. And don't hesitate to reach out to any of us if we can help you really bring your program to life going forward. But enjoy your day, everyone. And we'll see you next time.